Whoever you are and whenever you are, welcome good souls of the planet and beyond to Paranormal Now. I'm Alan B. Smith. Join us as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal portals and tantalizing turnoffs. Joining us for the full 2 hours tonight is Rebecca Hardcastle Wright, and we'll be taking off from where we were last week, discussing conscious contact with Mother Earth and going totally cosmic. So stay tuned for that. As always, please share your thoughts and experiences with us during or after the show on Facebook.com/ParanormalNowRadio, Twitter @Paranormal_now, and of course, join us in the chat room on the KGRA website. Just go to kgraradio.com, drop down menu to chat, join us, but watch your eyes as sometimes in chat the GIFs get a little off the hook. And you all know who I'm talking about. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your continued support as we grow Paranormal Now, as KGRA continues to grow. It's really an exciting time. We have so many new platforms, including video streaming. There's the new Breakdown show on the KGRA YouTube channel. And there's so much more coming this next year that I can't quite talk about yet, but we'll be able to share some of that soon. And then personally for myself, if you could go to the youtube.com/paranormalpop, P-O-P, Paranormal Pop page and subscribe, I would sincerely appreciate it. So I've started, as you know, a series called Coffee and UFOs, which is a more casual, short-form version of talk radio like we do here, but it's on video. And now we're doing a new series called Fun with Ufology. These are 2-minute summaries of some of what I think are the most important and significant cases in ufology. So the plan right now is to do one a week, do 15 to 20 of those. We'll see how that plays out. And then I'll go even slower and we'll do 10 to 15-minute mini documentaries, essentially, on each of these cases, which I suspect may take a couple of years to get through all of them. But the 2-minute, we should have 15 to 20 of those cases covered in the next, I would think, 9 months, 6 months or so. So we'll see how that plays out again. But your support and your encouragement really is helpful to me. So if you can go to the youtube.com/paranormalpop page, please like, subscribe, share the videos, and comment down below because YouTube just loves activity. So the algorithms will pick up on that activity and boost some of those videos. All right. So, the long-awaited guest that I have personally been excited to have on our show, Rebecca Hardcastle Wright, Ph.D. She is a leading expert in cosmic consciousness and extraterrestrial contact. She is committed to building an exoconscious civilization co-created by humans, ETs, and multidimensional beings, uniting to build an exoconscious civilization. We gain deeper knowledge of who we are as humans and our relationship to ETs and multidimensionals. And we'll have to find out what multidimensionals are. As we build, we learn. Rebecca is the founder and director of the International Nonprofit Institution for Exoconsciousness. The Institute's mission is to advance entrepreneurial experiencers who are inventing next-era co-created technology, science, communication, education, art, and healing. A lifelong contactee, Rebecca's signature research focuses on exoconscious humans, experiencers who integrate and utilize their long-term contact. She appreciates the fragile nature of anomalous experiences and promotes the need to strengthen psychic intelligence and abilities. After coining the word exoconsciousness in 2008, Exoconscious Human, Claiming Psychic Intelligence is a Transhuman World will be published will be published in 2020. In Washington, D.C., Rebecca was a member of Apollo 14 astronaut Dr. Edgar Mitchell's Quantrek International Science Team, researching zero-point energy, consciousness, and the ET presence. Rebecca also authored the Exoconscious Analysis of the Free Experiencer Survey Data and Beyond UFOs, The Science of Consciousness and Contact with Non-Human Intelligence, Volume 1, and we've covered that several times. including having Ray Hernandez on the show. He's a fantastic guest. We've had him on, I believe, 3 times now, so it's been a while. In 2005, Rebecca taught one of the first ufology courses in the nation of Scottsdale Community College. Her graduate degrees include an MDiv in philosophical theology from Boston University School of Theology and a PhD in parapsychic science from American Institute of Holistic Theology. Her undergraduate degree is from Otterbein University. She studied continental philosophy in Basel, Switzerland. Rebecca was ordained in the United Methodist Church and served as an interfaith chaplain at Wright State University, Dayton, Ohio. She is certified as a hypnotherapist and coach from Southwest Institute for Healing Arts. Her website is RebeccaHardcastleWright.com. Rebecca, I almost paused to take a sip of water before I finished that. There is so much going on there, and that was the edited down version of your bio. And again, that's why I'm so excited, because you have just so much to offer.
Oh, thank you, Alan. It's wonderful to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. Absolutely. So, okay, here's the thing that I think is really fascinating, that you taught one of the first ufology courses in the nation of Scottsdale Community College.
I did.
How did that work out? How did you even convince anyone to let you do that?
Well, what happened was, at the time, I was in an experiencer group in Fountain Hills, Arizona. I had moved from Dayton, Ohio to Arizona, and I ended up in this little kind of a mountain town called Fountain Hills. And someone came up to me one day and said, "You need to meet this woman, Ruth Hover." And so I thought, oh, okay. So I went to meet her. And for the first time in my life, because I'm a childhood experiencer, I was able to be with other adults who were experiencers in this group. Mm-hmm. And she became my mentor. She had this amazing library and loaned me all her books to read. And it was just a time of just exponential growth for me. Mm-hmm. And so one day I just decided, why don't we have a university course? And I was in education at the time, so I knew how to write a curriculum. So I laid out a curriculum and made a proposal, and I took it to Scottsdale, and I knew it looked really professional because at that time I knew what I was doing. Mm-hmm, sure. And they accepted it. And so the class was filling very slowly. I called it Extraterrestrial Reality was the name of the course. Oh. So back then, they really didn't have, social media in 2005, and they really didn't, I was doing some PR at the time also for an educational institute. So I knew I had a media list of people, phone numbers, fax numbers. So what I did was I made a press release and I sent out a fax to all of the major newspapers and television networks in Dayton. And I got on every morning, afternoon, and evening news show in Dayton. I'm sorry, in Phoenix, mm-hmm. to promote this course, and the course filled. So we had an amazing group of students. Many of them were experiencers, people who knew a lot about ufology history. And, remember, this is back in 2005, so it really wasn't as popular as of a topic, in terms of television. Certainly there were some movies, but, it wasn't as well known.
Pre-Ancient Aliens on History Channel.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And so I taught that for a semester, and then unfortunately someone wrote a letter to the president of the college and complained about the use of public funds. So I got booted off.
Okay, so now
that happens.
But what year was that you left?
2005.
So that was very quick.
Yeah, well, it was very quick. It was one semester, and then it was over.
Well, I agree with you. I think that if you were to do or have that opportunity now rather than then with social media, I think you would fill that course.
Absolutely. And it's very interesting because people in education at universities, and actually a couple presidents of colleges have come out to me and said, oh, you should come and speak at my college. The kids will just really love what you have to say. Mm-hmm. The students will be so excited. And then nothing ever happens. So I would say that at some point there's going to be a breakthrough. I think there are select academics that come up. I don't know. Do you know the book American Cosmic by Diana Pulsaka? I think that's how she says her last name. Do you know of her? She teaches at University of North Carolina in Wilmington. And she's done a very in-depth, published by Oxford University Press, academic work on UFOs and extraterrestrials and technology. So I think it's slowly kind of beginning to build, but very slowly.
Right. So, but the free book Beyond UFOs shouldn't that really sort of serve almost as a
textbook?
Well, yeah, for like a curriculum outline.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a textbook. I mean, when Ray asked me to write a chapter in that book, I saw who all was writing, what they were writing about. I'm like, this is going to be a textbook someday. This is going to be a college textbook.
Yeah, how can it not be? And that's what's so sad, I think, that the public at large, education, they don't understand that there is tangible data out there.
Yes.
And that there's something to work with, something to study. And that's what it's all about, right? If you're going to have a class, you have to have something to study. And I kind of feel like if you can get that book in front of the right person, there might be a chance, maybe a community college somewhere where they're willing to be a little bit more experimental. I don't know.
It's a very interesting time right now that we're in terms of academia. I mean, I've written untold emails to presidents of colleges or department heads about exoconsciousness, about ufology, about integrating our knowledge into their curriculum, and just never get any kind of a solid response, maybe a polite reply. And it's interesting. You read that I went to Boston University School of Theology, and there was a theologian on the faculty there that had written, I think, at least 2 books on. His name was Ray Hart, H-A-R-T. He'd written a couple books on ufology and religion, and yet it doesn't seem like the academics ever became integrated into, kind of the speaking circuit that's evolved as ufology today.
Yes.
And I don't know why that is.
Well, okay, but if you look at Stanton Friedman, he started, what was it, like 68, something like that, when he started doing lectures. And he was going around to universities doing it, and people were taking him seriously, and he did that for decades. There seems to be an acceptance where you're allowed to have someone come in, speak for an hour or 2 about a topic like that. That's okay, but I can't actually have a full course.
Yes, a full curriculum.
Right.
That's the issue, I think, integrating that into the full curriculum.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you were given just one full year, right, 2 semesters as an experiment,
I'd love it.
Well, there's a lot to cover in exo everything, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
What would you choose to focus on? What would you be your main topics that you would have to get in those 2 semesters?
Well, I believe in breaking things up, so I would probably do semester 1 as more of the hard science and the UFO facts and information in terms of sightings, in terms of statistics, and look at the history of how that evolved. And then the second semester, I would definitely go into consciousness and exoconsciousness and contact and experiencers. And on both accounts, weaving in the science. So, what's the, perhaps, for example, looking at some point when you're examining UFOs, looking at what's the science behind these metamaterials that they're exploring right now, or what are some possible physics around propulsion systems of craft? How might they be working? What's some of the challenges in terms of, a warp drive or what are some of the cosmological significance of parallel universes, or moving, at warp speed through some interdimensionally into a different dimension. What would that mean scientifically? And then, of course, with the exoconsciousness, you would certainly be looking at neuroscience, consciousness of the brain, consciousness of in terms of our DNA, how we as a physical body are through consciousness able to change our DNA possibly, and there's just looking at telepathy, looking at what's being done technologically with telepathy, looking at certainly mind control programs in the past, how they worked, what we've learned about electromagnetics and the brain. I mean, it'd just be so many deep and interesting discussions. Look at the science of religion behind UFO encounters and how they are so similar to sightings of, for example, in Portugal. There's a colleague of mine that has written about 3 books now on
Fatima.
The Lady Fatima prophecy. And he's gone to the Vatican Library, and he's documented that it was a UFO event. It was an extraterrestrial visitation UFO event. You just taking the language from that.
Yeah, and you must know Ted Peters, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Well, so Ted was the first guest I ever had. And that was before Paranormal Now, when I was on Epic Voyages Radio on IRN. And Ted he's been on the show probably just as frequently as Peter Robbins. And he just came on this past December to do a Christmas special with me. And that's one of my favorite topics talking to him about is the parallels between these religious myths and the reported transportive experiences that people have with the close encounter and ET contact experience. It's amazing how many parallels are occurring.
Well, I was a philosophical theology major, and you can't have any belief in the Bible or any reasonable evidence in the Bible. It's all witness. It's all witness testimony. That's what you have. The Bible's witness testimony, and biblical scholars admit that. So, if you're looking at Fatima, or if you're looking at UFO, and if you're looking at extraterrestrial experiencers, it's witness testimony. Now, does that make exoconsciousness or a religion? No, but that subjective element within exoconsciousness, which I would say would be going back to quantum physics and saying once quantum physics came about scientifically, then what quantum physics did with the whole observer effect is that they took objectivity and kind of knocked it down a few pegs to say that if a phenomenon or a particle is being observed, then it's being influenced. So the whole, to me, my first book, Exoconsciousness, Your 21st Century Mind, that's what I examined a great deal in that, because witness testimony is subjectivity. It's what the subject has to say about what happened. And I think that the science is just catching. I mean, consciousness science has only been in university departments since the 90s. It's not very old. It's like 20. It's barely an infant in terms of looking at other disciplines like math or different areas of science or religion or sociology. I mean, it's a very new subject to study. So I think that it's going to take some time for science to catch up to where we're at in a quantum world in terms of consciousness.
Right. Avi Loeb, Harvard physicist, seems to be quite comfortable speculating with the fact that an intersolar body could be an alien craft.
Right.
That to me, the fact that he's comfortable saying that out loud indicates that there's something changing within academia, and I honestly have to really give credit to Michio Kaku, because I really feel like he was one of the first mainstream scientists who gained popularity and came out very early on, like early 2000s. He was very quite comfortable talking about ETs visiting us, and maybe they're here and we just don't see them. And it's taken a long time, but now I'm noticing that other scientists are having this conversation. Do you ever get a chance to meet with, or email back and forth with any of the scientists from academia that are sharing thoughts with you, but they just can't come out yet and say it out loud?
Well, I certainly did when I worked with Edgar Mitchell. For 6 years, I lived in Washington, D.C. and worked with his Quantrek organization. So what we were doing we were studying zero-point energy, but we were studying it in the context of science, certainly, mathematics predominantly, and also talking about human consciousness as well as the extraterrestrial presence. Edgar felt as though we couldn't really ever solve the issues around zero-point energy until we had a discussion of human consciousness and brought in those aspects as well as human consciousness in the extraterrestrial. So I worked with a lot of scientists at that point. Most of them, unfortunately, were people that had retired. And when they retired, they just felt like they just had freedom to do things that they just didn't have freedom to do as a professional professor. Right. So, and part of that is that there's still a very, very strong peer-to-peer, everything has to be peer-reviewed. So for someone to, go out into the waters and kind of float their boat academically around UFOs or extraterrestrials, the question would be, what's your peer review? How's that going to come out? And if your peer review is squashed, then, that may affect how you get tenure or where you get placed in terms of the administration of your department or what teaching loads you get. So, right. That's a real universe there. It was funny. Back in, it was 2007, a friend of mine, I've always been active in philosophy, and a good friend of mine was part of the American Philosophical Association, and he emailed me one day and he said, hey, because I had just started writing my book on exoconsciousness at that point, and he reached out to me and said, hey, why don't you come to the American Philosophical Association and do a paper on exoconsciousness? I'm like, wow, okay. So I submitted a paper. It's actually part of the Carl Jaspers group. He was a continental philosopher, Carl Jaspers, Jaspers. It's part of their online work through the American Philosophical Association. They publish my paper in there. They collect all the papers that are presented every year and make like a fetch schrift out of them and put it together so people can read the papers. But I went to Baltimore to make the presentation, and it's a good memory because I'm sitting in this room. It's like 90% men, if not 95% men. And I'm sitting in my chair nicely, kind of waiting for things to happen, and waiting for my turn to present my paper. And a man in front turns to the man next to him. So this man sitting in front of me turns to the man next to him and says, oh my golly, did you see the paper on extraterrestrials? Is somebody crazy here or what? And just was going off on how loony I was. And I tapped him on the shoulder and I said, oh, hi, I'd like to introduce myself. And I introduced myself and said, I'll be giving that paper. And he was just – but, Alan, the most interesting thing that happened – and once again, this is 2007 – the most interesting thing that happened at that time was when I got up in front of that audience, most of the time when you're in these academic settings, it's not really a PowerPoint presentation. It's pretty dry. You just get up and read your paper. I mean, it's kind of a little bit of a snooze fest. So I thought, wait a minute, I'm not going to get up and read this paper because honestly, I don't think they're going to know what I'm even talking about. And so I just floated a few mainstream ufology words out into the audience just to see.
Yeah.
No one knew what any of them meant. And I knew at that point that I was talking to an audience who would not be able to even have an elementary understanding of anything that I was talking about.
Well, right. I mean, if you have no context, no matter what the topic is, it's almost just words coming out, and you can't intellectualize anything. So I can
no. So that's when I knew that, academia, it just was not ready. It was not ready for this kind of discussion.
Right. Okay. Let's hold it right there, Rebecca, because we're at the first break. Sure. But we will come back on the other side and continue this because this is really fascinating to see where this leads you. And also, maybe let's take a little bit of time to actually explain to the audience and really package it what exoconsciousness is, and what your intent is. So this is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRA Radio. I'm with Rebecca Hardcastle Wright. Stay tuned. It gets far more fascinating. We'll be right back.
Your official contact for the best alternative talk on the planet. KGRARadio.com.
Welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith, your grateful host, taking us out of the break was Septembrio, spelled with a Y.com. If you love their music, go check them out, support them, download. They're really good people. They're not our sponsors. They just voluntarily share their music for bumper music because they just fit so well with this program. Okay, we are back with Rebecca Hardcastle Wright, and we're talking exoconsciousness. So, Rebecca, we left it at you having a difficult time communicating with scientists who just had no context for anything that had to do with, I guess, what, just ufology in general?
Yes, ufology in general.
Mm-hmm. Now, don't you think that people were exposed to some programs like Leonard Nimoy's, oh my gosh, I forget the program in the 70s.
Oh, right. I know what you mean.
Right.
Well, probably, but I think there's a compartmentalization aspect in academia that we are careful around, and they are careful around, in that when you're in an academic institution, your knowledge and your work is very compartmentalized into the topic about which you're writing. You know, if you're an expert on, a certain type of science or genetics, or if you're in philosophy, then you're in a certain, era or field or school of philosophy, and so it's kind of like intelligence. You know how intelligence is compartmentalized? the academics are compartmentalized in the same way. And so when you get into ufology or you get into exoconsciousness or talking about experiencers, that is a very multidisciplinary and broad field, and you have to know a lot about a lot of different subjects. It's funny, when I was in D.C., a friend of my family worked for Lockheed Martin, and he was actually part of my extended family, and I was talking to him about founding the Institute for Exoconsciousness, and I was kind of having my first rumblings of this is the next phase that I wanted to go into in my work. And so he said to me, he was retired at the time, but he said to me, why don't you just write a white paper? Write me a white paper, but make it extensive, where you talk about, for example, let's have a white paper on how exoconsciousness relates to space travel. And I eventually published that white paper as How Exoconscious Humans Guide Our Spacefaring Future. So I gave him that white paper, and I contextualized exoconsciousness within science, within space, within technology, within history, within politics. And he came back to me later and said, you know a lot about a lot of things. And he was very surprised about it. And I think that's just the discipline that we have in this field. You can't go into this field without having the ability of complex learning, where and not superficial learning either, but that you take time every day to learn about physics, to learn about science, to learn about consciousness, to learn about what's happening in ufology, to learn about sociology and religion. I mean, you really have to be a person that wants to study this, because there's so many dimensions to it. And
yes,
that's just a fact.
It's not just studying it, but it's creating a cohesive narrative in your head, and being able to put that down on paper and share that with people. Right. Putting those puzzle pieces.
Then you see patterns. Then you see how different things happened at different times and sort of relationships. And it's very fulfilling. I love it.
Are you okay? Are you comfortable not knowing the answers, or knowing that you may never get the answers?
Answers to what?
To all the questions, all the big questions.
I'm comfortable with not having the answers, because I'm comfortable with exploring and knowing that new information is coming to me at all times, and that it's not just a mental exercise for me, but I operate very holistically. I'm a therapist, so I operate very holistically. So I believe that this information not only impacts me intellectually, but it impacts me psychically, and it impacts me physically in my whole body, and emotionally, certainly. And I think there's a certain demand in it. There's a certain it's not really – exoconsciousness really isn't rose-colored glasses, and maybe that's a good time to get into this. Exoconsciousness is really about taking a group of people, a group of us who have decided to gather together and have been in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, we are lifelong experiencers, or long-term experiencers would be a better way to define it. We are long-term experiencers. And as such, we have moved far beyond the event. So the event would be, I saw a UFO, or I had ET contact. And many of us have ongoing contact. If not, most of us have ongoing contact.
Yeah. So
because of that, we work very hard at literally integrating that contact into who we are as a self, who we are as a person, who we are as a mature, grounded, responsible, moral individual here on planet Earth. So it's not just about, oh, this is thrilling or exciting or scary, but this is about, taking humanity and ourselves in the microcosm of humanity, taking ourselves into this era of being able to, as I say, an exoconsciousness, that we have chosen to use our innate abilities to connect, communicate, and co-create with extraterrestrials and multidimensionals. So basically, exoconsciousness is the cosmic mind. It's ancient. Humans have had the cosmic mind since there were humans, and it's our link into space. It's our link beyond Earth. It's our link into the field of consciousness, and this innate cosmic mind that we have, we are expressing that through our work in exoconsciousness.
Yeah, what is it that we're all trying to connect to? Because we're reaching through religion, we are trying meditation, some people end up using drugs. We're all trying to get to this connectiveness. What is it? What is that thing or substrate?
Well, I think part of what we're dealing with when we talk about that question, and here my therapist is going to kick in, is we can either begin to make that exploration through our environment. So that would be something outside of us. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that would be a CE5. That would be looking up into the world and into the sky and communicating with, a UFO or some kind of a craft outside of ourselves. So that was CE5 for Stephen Greer. So CE4 for Jacques Vallée would be more about the abduction. So right. Someone else in my outside environment abducted me and caught me, and it's been told, as Jacques Vallée did such a wonderful presentation of, that's gone on for eons in human history. So for exoconscious humans, we take that focus off outside of ourselves and we put the focus internally into our consciousness. And when we do that, it becomes a very different exploration. It becomes, how do you integrate this mind that you're searching for out there? How do you integrate that internally such that you allow it to manifest and move through your life and become one with who you are? So it would be part of my definition of self, SELF, myself. Mm-hmm. And that's really what exoconscious humans are doing. So once we move into this, I would say, ability to be comfortable with who we are as cosmic beings or as a cosmic human, we could say it like that, mm-hmm. that when we get to that point of being comfortable as a cosmic human, that's really the point when our communication and co-creation with extraterrestrials takes on a different dimension. It's peer-to-peer at that point.
Is this the natural outgrowth of all sentient, self-aware beings?
It's an innate ability.
Are we all drawn? Are we to join the community? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think we're drawn. I think that we do it in different ways. So you could look at someone like, Bezos and Musk and Branson going into space. Mm-hmm. They're drawn to it through the environment toward outer mechanisms. I'm gonna make a rocket, or I'm gonna launch 20,000 satellites. I'm drawn to it through this outer manifestation of in the environment with engineering and science, and I believe very strongly that if we don't begin now to integrate people who are exoconscious and have done that work of literally being a living and breathing cosmic mind that's been brought into being cosmic being, that we're going to miss a whole aspect of the space age if we. And that's been my whole goal, is to find a way to integrate us into this age of space. I'm writing a book now on how we're integrating into transhumanism. And I think it's very important that our voices are heard.
So is there an individual soul within each of us? It's like something that is separate but a part of the body that longs for the source. Is it something like that? Or are we all like a new form, a new being? Like each of us, our souls are something that's new unto the earth. Does that make sense to you, what I'm asking?
Oh, it totally makes sense. Okay. I think part of it, let's go back to the whole idea of consciousness. So consciousness can be seen as the brain. So we have, George W. Bush was really the first one that started the first brain initiative back in 2000. He started about the same time that the Genome Project started. Obama gets credit for it, but it was really George W. Bush that started it. And the Genome Project was a hit, and the brain initiative obviously wasn't. So when Obama came in, he said, okay, we're going to have a brain initiative, and we're going to run it like the Genome Initiative. So it began to take off, and now we have, a lot of neuroscience that is beginning to take apart the brain. And the whole goal of this brain initiative is that we can find consciousness in the brain. That we're going to eventually build a neural net, or we're going to build a computer brain, or an AI, or a quantum computer brain that's going to literally have consciousness, because we've done so many synapses and computerized programs and AI that it's going to all of a sudden just become conscious.
Yeah, because I think you're right that if we are going to become a part of the cosmic community, that we would need a skill set on par with where these other beings are intellectually or spiritually, right?
Yes, and Exoconsciousness would say to that is an admirable venture. I mean, I use neuroscience all the time as a therapist. I use it in my work all the time. It's very valuable. And I also know that consciousness is beyond the brain. The consciousness, you could build all the brains you want to build, and you're still not going to have human consciousness, because, I subscribe to the Rupert Sheldrake and, Wright and, different scientists like that. I believe that consciousness is literally beyond the brain, that we have, through exoconsciousness, through working with multidimensionals, with working through extraterrestrials, that we go out into the field of consciousness and we connect with these sometimes embodied and sometimes disembodied beings. And religion has been part of this also. Religion knows that that consciousness is beyond the brain. And poets know this, and writers know this, and artists know this. And I think that when you bring that dimension in, that's really where exoconsciousness comes to bear. That you can take a chemical rocket and you can just engineer it until you're blue in the face.
Sure.
And work on it day and night. Or you can bring in an exoconscious human that literally taps into the field of consciousness and brings in information either from other beings or maybe people, Tesla type people that have passed over, and builds a rocket that has never even been thought of before.
Right. Which is, yeah, you're right. With Tesla, he had this idea that he was getting information from other beings, right? Or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And many high-profile scientists. I mean, when I was working with Edgar, people would send us things, and you'd be like, what? And sure enough, once I kind of, read the paper and thought about it and kind of let it sit inside of me for a while, I would stumble across things that validated I could see where they were going with this. But it certainly wasn't mainstream, chemical rocketry.
Right.
But that's, I think we as a human species have been comfortable with consciousness beyond the brain in certain fields. We've been comfortable with it in religion. We've been certainly comfortable with it in the arts. And I think in some scientists have talked about it. But for most of, let's just go back to academia, for most academic disciplines, there hasn't been a big comfort level with it because of our emphasis on the need for evidence and the need for scientific proof. And, what if we don't have the tools to examine these scientific truths with yet? So I can understand why they don't, but I also know that things are moving so fast right now, especially as a lot of the secret space program initiatives seem to be unveiling themselves all of a sudden.
Do you think the Space Force is related to that?
Absolutely, don't you?
I think there's something there. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Sure. I mean, things happen at these different times, and yeah, absolutely. And people are, being prepared for it or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. I saw people online teasing, I guess some aspect of the Space Force had camouflage.
Oh, the uniform.
Yeah. But, I have family in the military, and I was like, I'm pretty sure they just haven't allocated the budget for, designing new. And they're like, yeah, that's probably what it is. They just haven't gotten around to it yet. But I just thought that was a cheap tease, but it's funny.
Well, and I think also, I don't know if you follow Catherine Austin Fitz, but, she's just done an incredible job on, $21 trillion missing dollars and the secret space budget. And, people are kind of calm. People are very accepting of that now, I think.
Well, it's okay. So it's so funny because when we talk about UFOs, we say, oh my God, it's too big for people. They can't wrap their brains around it. Right. But then you say, oh, by the way, we're missing trillions of dollars, and they still can't wrap their brains around it, or refuse to. They don't want to question that. Why aren't the reporters, hitting hard on these questions over and over again? Why isn't the public going, what happened in 2001? Where did that money go?
Oh, I know. And I mean, and I think part of that's that breakdown that's happening now in terms of the press and people just being tired of, mainstream press, telling you what to think and how to think.
Yeah.
I've always been of the mind that extraterrestrials, multidimensional experiencers, or exoconscious humans, whatever you want to call us, that many of us that have lived in this field for years, if not decades, that we already know what the information is. We already know most, if not all, of the secrets. And maybe we even know more than the secrets, because if you have an ability to put together patterns or put relationships together, and you're dealing with people that have been so compartmentalized for so many years under so much secrecy, that we are very well informed. I had a funny thing happen to me when I lived in D.C. I went up to Philadelphia and did a talk. I think it was like a MUFON group, or a Pennsylvania MUFON group or something, their annual symposium. And I was going through my slides, and all of a sudden I just said, well, and I looked out over this room, and it was just full of MUFON, UFO, ufologist investigators. And I know by just looking at them that many of them had been involved in this personally, if not as a researcher, for probably decades. And I said to the audience, I said, how many of you believe that the government knows things about UFOs and ETs that you don't know?
Mm-hmm.
and every one of them raised their hand. I was devastated. I was stunned. I'm like, I looked at them and I said, "You're kidding me." It's like humans don't give themselves. Once again, that's that outward orientation. Once you have this outward orientation where you're judging and you're criticizing yourself, as to why social media is the best at doing this to people.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
You don't really know anything, and keep your mouth shut. That outward orientation, intelligence and secret programs love it. They love it because everybody just goes along and thinks that they don't know anything when they know everything.
Yeah. Well, I guess because it's mixed in the fray with lots of bad information and
for sure, disinformation
and contrived. Yeah. Well, or even just people on social media. I see some social media accounts where it's the person is curating it as someone who follows ufology, but some of the stuff that they post is just all over the place and oftentimes just seems utterly fabricated. And a lot of times, there's some serious fact checking that I know what they're saying or posting is utterly wrong. And so so basically what I'm saying is that you can have people doing the research like yourself and other ufologists who are more careful about what they present. And then other people, just some random person at home in their bedroom, ripping something off of online, posting it on their account, and creating a story around that is not true. And so there's this mixed bag out there for people. And how do you know where to land? How do you know which sources to trust when there's just so much trash out there?
Well, you trust yourself.
You got to trust your gut.
You got to trust yourself. Yeah, you got to trust yourself, your experience. You have to trust the discipline and the commitment that you've had as a person to learn about ufology, to learn about exopolitics, to learn about exoconsciousness. You have to trust that when it comes down to it. And do your own little bit of fact checking anyway, right? And do some fact checking, or if something doesn't feel right, just say, this doesn't feel right to me.
Yeah.
And back to the brain. Social media is nothing but the big field of dopamine. The dopamine response. Have you seen those videos about the dopamine response in Facebook?
Yeah, of course. It's all built around that. Exactly.
So a lot of that is just. That's algorithms that are putting that in there so that you get all keyed up. A lot of that stuff I don't even think is written by people. I'm writing that book on transhumanism. About 50 to 70% of what we read in these news feeds on our phones, those are all written by algorithms.
All right. Well, let's hold it there. We're at the second and last break. I do want to talk a little bit more about this as well because I spend much less time on Facebook than I ever have, and I feel better than I ever have. And I didn't mention this at the top of the show. I have been the past several shows, but I'm experimenting with MeWe, which is a data protective social media site, and it doesn't use manipulative algorithms. So I started a Paranormal Now page there, and I post here and there. There's only like 6 million people there, I think, at this point, maybe 7. I don't know, but so it's going to take a long time to take off, but my hope is that enough people are going to say enough is enough. They're going to jump ship and find another social media site, and maybe that's what it will take for Facebook to change those setups. So anyway, we will continue talking about consciousness, exoconsciousness, and not being manipulated by social media on the other side of this break. This is Alan B. Smith for Paranormal Now on KGRA Radio. We will be right back.
On and again, the signs keep on coming, they point to the end, but I hold on so tight. Back and forth in my mind, beating conclusions I don't wanna find, 'cause I know it's not right. When I come home.
You listen to us, and we listen to you. And so does the CIA. KGRAradio.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith on KGRA Radio. My guest is Rebecca Hardcastle, Wright, PhD. Taking us out of the break, once again, was music by Septembrio. So just go to septembrio.com and check those guys out. Okay, so mind and manipulation, freeing your mind. We're talking about it all here tonight. And I just want to add, Rebecca, that I understand the benefits that come with social media like Facebook, but I sometimes wonder, would the world be better off without it? What do you think?
I think the creators of Facebook, and I can't remember the young man's name, I believe an Indian man, and he spoke at Stanford to the MBA group. It's a video that's on Facebook. You could probably just Google it with those words. And I don't know if he did customer service or customer relations or whatever. And, you know, he's been one of the first people to come out and say very starkly that we've ripped apart the social fabric of society.
Right.
That's a stark
claim.
Yeah. Yeah. That's some serious, and that they knew that they were ripping apart the social fabric of society when they did that. But you know,
so what was their motive? The motive was just money, just power?
Oh, no, I think the motive was surveillance. You know,
but Mark Zuckerberg was just a kid in college when he started all this. I mean, do you really think that was his
I don't think Mark Zuckerberg started Facebook.
Okay.
No, Mark Zuckerberg was part of a group that was pulled into a Johns Hopkins kind of special child program.
Yeah.
Actually, Facebook was started with a group of people in Ohio that came up with the technology for logging in, because you can't have any kind of social media without a logging in function. Mm-hmm. Now, the logging in function took these computer scientists, get this, 10 years to develop.
10 years?
10 years to develop the login function. And then the government stole it from them. And they've never been compensated for it. They're a group out of Columbus, Ohio, I believe.
Wow.
And they've never been compensated for it. There's YouTubes about it and articles about it on the internet. Mm-hmm. So that took them 10 years. So, you know, Mark Zuckerberg was pretty much fronted out by the government to do Facebook. I mean, that's just a story about how he invented Facebook and some wintry afternoon at his dorm room when he didn't go home for the holidays. It's just foolishness. That was all given to him. I think most things that we're looking at now that are surveillance type of internet services, whether it's Amazon or the whole Elon Musk and Tesla or social media, all of those are surveillance types of technologies. and all that was that was given by cell phones. I think Apple, Bill Gates. I think all that was government programs that they were given to be the face of.
Yeah, I can't. Do you remember the name of the app where you could enter your face and then it would aid you? It was a Russian developed
Sure.
app. I forget what the name of that was, but I saw someone post online like, here you go, Russia, with a middle finger. You can have my face. I don't care what you do with it. Blah, blah. And I was like, no. Don't do that, because that's what's happening emotionally. Is I feel like people are
giving themselves away
by pretending like they're owning it. But I'm like, you're not owning it. You're
being owned.
You're being owned. Right.
Did you ever have Elena Freeland come on your show?
No.
Do you know of her?
No.
Oh, she wrote a book. She's written a book on chemtrails, but her her recent book is Under an Ionized Sky. Mm-hmm. And she's brilliant. She's a researcher out of Portland, and I do integrating some of her work in my book on exoconsciousness and transhumanism.
Okay.
And she's done a beautiful job of integrating all of these complex layers of the surveillance system that really start out in space with satellites, rocketry, HARP, CERN, the whole the Gwyn towers that move information across the United States, and then then the particles from the chemtrails, the different delivery systems into the human body via nanoparticles and vaccines and GMOs, and how we are literally now we're in the surveillance phase, but eventually we're moving very rapidly into the synthetic biology stage, where we will just be a component in this technology.
Just a component?
Yes.
What?
Just a component.
And what is the component?
We'll be a transmitter, we'll be a receiver, we'll be given information, we'll be pretty much living in a surveillance, control, command, and computerized power grid.
Well,
and we'll have ionized bodies.
That's crazy. Wow. See, now it's
very complex, and this is part of the secret space program. Make no mistake. This is part of the secret space program. That and underground, and part of it goes underground. So it goes far underground, it goes far up into space, and it's all a connected system. And we are a component in the connected system.
Okay, so here's the thing. Like, as scary as that sounds, are you a Star Wars fan by chance?
I always thought Star Wars was propaganda to militarize UFOs.
Okay. Oh my God.
Go ahead. I've seen Star Wars.
You've hurt my soul. No. So, the in the latest movie, I love what they did with one of the characters who worked for essentially like the new Empire, right? And it turned out he betrayed the First Order, which was the evil new Empire, and he was a part of them, but he betrayed them. Why? Because he wanted to see other people within that party get hurt who betrayed him or mistreated him. So his action of creating destruction, of treason, had nothing to do with being righteous. It had only to do with his own personal vendetta. And I thought that was really great, because even when empires rise or new systems of power rise, it's not just the people who are fighting the good cause, not just the one, person in that group that might just have a change of heart that would betray this evil thing, but it could be someone also evil who betrays it and undermines it and breaks that system down. So I always have this little bit of hope that no matter how bad this looks, how much control the government will try to seize and manipulate, that it's not an end game situation, right?
Well, it's not an end game situation, because it's basically built upon almost like a cybernetics closed feedback loop, and And I don't believe that mind and consciousness is a cybernetic feedback closed loop. I mean, some humans act like their brain, that's what their brain is. I just don't choose, nor, that's one of the reasons for the Institute. I feel like either humans are going to, become sort of sovereign, moral, autonomous individuals where they learn how to use and develop their cosmic mind and move in either even more powerful ways out into the field of consciousness. That when that happens, that, and maybe technology is pushing us that way, because life on Earth kind of happens like that sometimes. There's sort of like a push, and then humans are affronted by what's happened to them. Mm-hmm. Kind of there's a cyclical nature to it. Like you get pushed, and that push opens up a freedom for you. That's what I see probably going to happen, that more and more people are going to, that these surveillance, command, control, computerized systems are going to be in place, and, these nanoparticles or whatever are already in our bodies. But I actually work for an alternative physician as a therapist. I see his patients. And one of the reasons why I founded the Institute was because I saw that a lot of these toxic technologies that were around us in our environment, as well as internally inside our body, that we can literally get rid of them and detox them. And the people I saw coming up with the ideas of how to free ourselves from it were exoconscious humans. They were the ones that were thinking outside the box. They were the ones that were, tapping into the field of consciousness and bringing these new inventions and these new ideas. So maybe this whole technocratic surveillance system, is it going to go away? Absolutely not. It's not going to go away. But are humans going to maybe move beyond it and realize that that they're not dependent on it, that they can use it when they choose to? I mean, I use a computer every day. I choose when I use a computer. But that I know that in my cosmic consciousness that I have a different dimensionality to my mind and to my ability to create. That's my optimism for the day.
What does that optimism feel like for someone with exoconsciousness? What does that feel like in the body or the brain when they're tapped in?
It feels great. It feels great because I'm a trauma therapist. Mm-hmm. That's what I do. That's my kind of my day job. So I learned a lot about trauma. And when you learn about trauma, you learn about mind control. And when you learn about mind control, you learn about propaganda. And you begin to see through all these silly stories like, Zuckerberg inventing Facebook on an afternoon in his dorm room. It's just foolishness.
Too sounds just too
foolishness.
Too simplistic.
Yeah, they're just stories. Yeah. They're just propaganda. And a lot of things, for example, like 5G. I mean, there was an article now because one of the most heavily constructed 5G areas in the world is South Korea. And the reports are coming out of South Korea now. Everybody's afraid of 5G and all like that. And it's coming out of South Korea now that they say it's useless. It doesn't work half the time. So it's kind of like, there's always another side. And our news feeds and Facebook are just filled with this propaganda because I lived in Washington, D.C. for almost 7 years. And quite frankly, they're all out looking for dollars, and they use ads and propaganda and made up stories and made up successes that in order to get funding. And quite frankly, so do the academics. They do the same thing. These universities, I mean, I don't know if you saw the analysis that was done recently on peer-reviewed sciences, where a group of scientists took several very prominent peer-reviewed theories of science and reviewed them, only to find out that there was no evidence for them. They all fell apart. So it's
Did they fall apart in light of new evidence, or it was just poorly...
No, they fell apart because they never were properly researched.
Ugh.
But they were, peer-reviewed articles that it's like, well, Rebecca's going to write an article and she's going to call Alan and Alan's going to call, Peter, and we're all going to peer review Rebecca's article. That's what happens in these groups. I mean, it's a huge academic international network of people that, they're all
each other's
on the
backs
same, same wavelength of money to finance these enormous universities.
Well, even some people in these universities will openly admit that they can only study things that gets funding.
Absolutely. Yeah. And ufology does not get funding.
It does not yet.
No. What gets funding are this whole space system that I'm talking about. That's what gets funding. Satellites, rocketry, mining of minerals, and then, another thing that we talk a lot about in terms of exoconscious humans is, and I wrote about in the Exoconscious Humans Guiding Our Spacefaring Future, is this whole, Elon Musk and Branson and Bezos, it's old time colonization. It's like the Virginia Company founding America, or the Puritans holding the Bible up for the Massachusetts Bay Colony, or the East India Company. I mean, we're just going back to this old, worn out colonization model of putting the flag down on the moon, on this side of the moon, and China's got their flag down on the far side of the moon, and the dark side of the moon. I mean, it's just, and when you go into exoconsciousness, it's like, no, you're that whole colonization attitude and perspective is totally void of anything that has to do with cosmic consciousness or the cosmic mind. And if you think you're going to learn about ETs by going to the dark side of the moon, I mean, it's just, that's why we founded the Institute. You're going to learn about ETs by learning about yourself and your own cosmic mind, and by taking that knowledge and going out and having, your continuing contact, so that you're literally co-creating something with ETs and multidimensionals. And you're a human creator. That's how you're going to learn. If what you put together works, or if it fails, you're going to learn about yourself, and you're going to learn about ETs by doing something, by building something. That's what we call the exoconscious civilization.
Well, how can you trust these ETs or interdimensionals?
Because you trust yourself, and you trust your relationship with them.
Well, I mean, we can meet other human beings, right? And feel like we trust them, and then it turns out that they're a murderer or whatever.
When you talk about trust, you're really talking about attachment. And when you talk about attachment, you're really talking about the early years of your life. Or did you have a secure attachment to the world when you came into the world, when you were brought into being? Did you have a secure attachment that you were safe and secure in the world? People that have a safe and secure attachment and were born with it are blessed. Most of us don't have it, and we have to spend time and energy developing that aspect of ourselves so that we can trust ourselves. And when you trust yourself, you're not going to get in a relationship with someone that's corrupt. Well, because you're going to smell it, and you're going to know it, and you're going to feel it.
Right. It's like you have to know the signals or the signs.
But that comes from in you.
Right. Okay. Yep. But sometimes
and the same
that
thing with ETs and multidimensionals. That's the same thing.
But sometimes it takes time, right, to develop that.
Absolutely,
maturity,
takes time.
Age.
Yes, age, maturity, experiences, events in your life, how much you choose to wake up every day of your life and be conscious of what you're doing, and not checked out, on a video game, or, sitting in your room smoking weed all day long, or getting drunk, or being a workaholic or a foodaholic, but you're literally conscious. You're conscious of yourself, and you're conscious of psychic intelligence is a very fragile ability. I'd be the first to say that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fragile ability. And if you have psychic intelligence and you want to respect it and work with it, well, then you better take the time every day of your life to be conscious about what you're doing and what you're receiving and what you're plugging into.
Yeah, yeah. I had an experience recently, a matter of trust, and in my conversations with my colleagues, it was, I got a bad feeling about this. This person, something's off. Something's not quite right. Followed up on it, pushed back on it, and then I got a response that put us all at ease, in a sense. It explained away everything. And then we all kind of were like, oh, well, this is a bummer, but, well, that makes sense. And then a week later, follow up, and then I find out that that's not entirely the case. And I should have trusted my first instinct, which was something's not right here. You know, there's something missing in this equation, in the communication, that's telling me not to trust this person. And then that initial intuition was correct, even though they put me at ease.
Good for you. Good for you.
Well, I wish I would have listened to it a little bit earlier, you know, and followed up on that instead of when they sweet talked us, basically, right? It was, I accepted it. We all accepted it. And so I wish I would have, you know, just listened to that first.
But did that experience make you stronger?
I suppose so. I mean, I don't know about stronger, but more, I think I'm a little bit more resolved to be self-aware of that next time.
Kind of use that muscle?
Yes, right. That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why I use the word strengthened you, because it's a muscle. It's kind of like a muscle.
Right. Okay.
And if you don't use it, and if you don't, that's what this co-creation is so important, because the Institute is really about doing. We're doers. We're builders. We're producers. We're entrepreneurs. We're out there doing things. And psychic intelligence really depends on using it and experiencing it and having successes and failures and learning about yourself. That's what exoconscious humans are about. We're about doing.
Are you and other exoconsciousness humans the modern day sages?
I don't know.
Is that
I don't know about that.
Why is that?
Maybe for the moment. I don't know.
Okay.
But
yeah.
I guess I see it more as, I think once you reach a comfort level because I see being a sage as somebody that really knows something and is sharing it. And I think that there's a dynamic aspect in exoconsciousness where you're at peace and congruent with the fact that you're not going to know everything. And you're going to continue to learn, and you're going to continue to grow, and you're going to continue to learn things about yourself and other people. And that this is why you're here on Earth. And you're going to continue to learn things about ETs and multidimensionals. And that's why you're here on Earth and other people.
When you're communicating with the ETs, is there a visualization that occurs there? Do you see what they look like, or
at different times in my life I would have to say that it goes through different cycles and phases for me, or it has gone through different cycles and phases. When I was a very, very young child, like about 3 years old, that's when I had my first really conscious extraterrestrial experiences. But I also had interdimensional experiences at that time also. So I've always kind of had both of them. And then there are other times when, you know, I was busy and I was having kids and being a mom, and, you know, there was contact, but it was certainly, you know, not as vivid. And then there was other times when it was extremely vivid and extremely visual. And then now it's more of an everyday, ordinary, commonplace. I mean, there'll be times when I'll be awakened, and I'll know that I'm going to get a message, or I'm going to get a download, or I'm expected to give an upload, because that's part of the co-creation process. Co-creation is I receive a download, I receive information, but co-creation is I'm expected to do an upload. Like, I'm expected to contribute.
Yeah, yeah.
That's a different place.
Are these?
So I would say probably not a sage.
Okay, fair enough. All right. But wisdom to be imparted.
Yes, continually.
Continually. Okay. And so will there be, well, I guess this is your hope, right? That there will be more and more people that can connect to these other consciousnesses?
I think that's happening right now, don't you? I mean, through your radio show, don't you feel that?
Well, I think more and more people are open-minded, but to have that sort of direct experience of, that downloading of information as it were. Is that growing? People like Tesla or yourself, where you can say, "Hey, I actually tap in, and I connect to this consciousness or that consciousness." Is there a day where one day we'll just be talking around the water hole about your connect?
I think so. I think that part of it is in my life. It's just been, there came a time in my life where I think I just decided I'm just going to own this. I'm going to own it. I'm going to let it be, part of my coming into being here on Earth, and I'm going to own my history of it, and I'm going to own my experience of it, and I'm going to live through it. I just owned it. I mean, it was a pretty simple decision, and I really haven't wavered from that.
So no regrets for your career choice?
No, no, I love it.
That's awesome. That's great. It's funny. Oftentimes ufologists in particular, it's funny that this doesn't often apply to paranormal investigators like, Ghostbusters and hunters, but I guess it does sometimes. But people critique ufologists for making a living doing it. And I always think that's one of the most absurd accusations ever, because it's like, we all want to study something or do something and make a living doing it. So whether you love basketball, if you're making money playing basketball, that's great. If you want to study astrophysics, that's great. You should get paid for that. Why not? If you want to study UFOs, why not make money doing that as well?
Don't you think the people that are saying that are the ones that really haven't owned the fact that they're an experiencer too, and kind of jumped into it with both feet?
Maybe.
And so they're kind of sniping from the sidelines.
I think, yes, in some cases. I do think that some of the accusation comes from a place where they might notice somebody spinning a yarn or exaggerating just to sell another book or what have you. So I think there are instances where that is the case, where people do embellish, if you will,
Sure.
in order to make a little bit more money. I think that does happen, but the general premise, I think it's totally wrong. I think whatever you enjoy doing life, that's what you should make money off of, and that's great that you found such a fascinating field.
And I did. I mean, I really had to, in order to make a living. I mean, I really had to integrate it into, being a writer, and then we're just really formally started the Institute in 2018. So we're still growing as an international institute, and then, in my therapy work, but in my mind, it all integrates, because inevitably I get clients that are more likely than not psychic, and not that they're necessarily ET experiencers, but they're usually psychic people. And, I love working with them, and it's very gratifying. I love doing interviews like this. I love writing books. It's just, it all fits together.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I was saying to you earlier, I mean, I could talk about this stuff forever as well. There's something about the process of exploration, of contemplation, of debate about all these mysteries that just fills me and thrills me. I suppose it's our modern day version, and well, I guess it is, because we talk about those things as well, of sitting around the campfire and telling mythological stories and asking, what does that mean? Why did they do that?
That's a great comparison. I agree with that. That's a great comparison.
Which makes us smarter. And that's why, to bring this back to Facebook, I do think Facebook is detrimental, because Facebook, while on the surface it appears to be that thing, it's not. It's an illusion. Because when you're sitting around the campfire, or when you're talking like you and I are, voice to voice or face to face, you're forced to have a more civil conversation. Whereas on Facebook and social media, all those, I don't even want to say inhibitions, because that's an insult to that, really. All those civility, yeah, it is thrown aside, and the worst of us comes out.
Well, that's rewarded on social media. You're rewarded for not being civil. Back to the whole dopamine discussion. Social media runs off of dopamine responses. So we like that kind of drugged hit to our brain, that dopamine release in our brain. Well, you release dopamine more with negative things like fright and terror and apocalyptic, or like you called it nicely, embellishments. That releases more dopamine. So that's more rewarded on a Facebook than somebody who has a rational, kind, civil discussion. So I don't think Facebook will ever be rational, kind, civil discussions. It's that the platform was not designed to do that. Did you in Instagram, I'll tell you how far it's gone. In Instagram, for example, which is a very fast moving platform.
Yep.
Very visual, and Facebook owns it. In Instagram, they have an algorithm that when you make a posting, if your posting gets a lot of positive comments, they will hold those comments back for a designated time. Yeah. So then your dopamine kicks in and you're thinking, nobody likes my post. Nobody likes me. Everybody's judging me. I'm embarrassed that I put my post out. And then boom, right when your dopamine is peaking, they dump all the likes.
Which is funny, because I really liked Instagram for quite some time. I think they were bought out, maybe 2 years ago? Was it by Facebook?
A couple years ago, I think.
And I've been spending increasingly less time on that platform, and I haven't really been conscious of why that is. I've just kind of been like, it's the same. I mean, and we can't have expectations that, I mean, if we think humans don't change, which I don't believe, but for sure technology doesn't change. And that whole program, I mean, they can tweak those algorithms all they want to, but Facebook is never going to work optimally the way they want it to work unless they can use that dopamine, and dopamine's got to be negative. So it's not going to change. Right. So then we should really just kind of
forget it.
It's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
So we have to look to other platforms like MeWe or what have you.
Yeah, absolutely.
But do you think that those platforms will eventually get co-opted?
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think that those social media platforms across the board, I think, it's like I have a friend that I communicate with him on Signal. Do you know Signal?
I do. Yeah.
It's encrypted, supposedly. And I mean, it's like, of course they can get on Signal and read everything you have. And it's like, well, Apple doesn't want to let us into the telephone of the person that the criminal's iPhone. It's like, give me a break.
I like they care so much. Right.
It's just foolishness. If we expect, if we have expectations of the surveillance system that we live in, that it's going to be kind and gentle and care about us, I mean, it's just craziness to think that.
So
that's kind of where my optimism lies, is that I think more and more people are waking up to the fact that, I better learn how to trust myself first.
Yeah.
Then I better learn how to trust my friends and my community. And then I better learn how to trust my consciousness. And that's how you make a life. You don't make a life with social media.
Well, I think a lot of people were hoping that 2012 would be this turning point. And I guess we're just waiting for
the kind of harmonic convergence kind of thing, or
yes, and then there's been arguments, of course, that that is happening. That was really just the turning point. But I think we're still waiting for our modern Boston Tea Party.
Well, we want an event, and the event is another dopamine hit. Quite frankly.
True.
Yeah, because it excites us. It gets our cha-cha going. We've got a story to tell people, so they'll pay attention to us, and we'll get affirmation. So once you kind of move beyond the event to where this is my ordinary, normal life, and it's not an event, then I feel like we'll be, and I think humans are going to get there, because I think social media is just rubbing it in our face.
Yeah,
it's
it really
rubbing
is.
it in our heart and mind.
It really is.
Vile it has become.
I think you're right. And when you see the footage of Zuckerberg in front of those hearings, his eyes are saying, I don't care. Ask me whatever you want. I don't care. We're just going to keep doing our thing. You're all a slave to us. That's the vibe I get from the guy. It's crazy.
Part of this is also, I think, when you look at the whole infrastructure of space, on down through, rockets and satellites, and down through, HARP and CERN and this whole, surveillance system down into our bodies. That is going to exist. That's not going to go away. But we have to create a life in spite of that. And I think that's always been an issue for humans, that whether they were, you were living in the British Isles when you were invaded by Rome, the people in the British Isles, they had to make a life in spite of the invasion. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's just kind of how these earth phases grow. And sure enough, the Roman Empire died out. And I think that there's going to be aspects of technology that are going to die out, and we're going to find that they don't really work the way we think they work. And humans are going to not only survive, but I think humans are going to really grow from the experiences that we're having today with what we're confronting and what we're living with. And it's safe to open your eyes and look at it with the knowledge that you're going to be able to deal with it, and you're not going to be overwhelmed, and you're not going to be afraid.
Yeah. Well, the interdimensional beings, do they look at us with pity at all, or with compassion?
Well, I think extraterrestrials, I sort of make a little bit of a differential between multidimensionals and extraterrestrials because,
sure.
Number one, as we were founding the Institute, a lot of people were saying that, there's interdimensional contact that isn't necessarily extraterrestrial. Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. I mean, I've had both. What extraterrestrial contact gives us oftentimes is it has a feel to it where you're really talking with another species, or a species that's similar to you, or a species that has a history and a timeline and a geography and a space. I think when you get into multidimensionals, oftentimes those beings are more without bodies, so they're not embodied. They don't necessarily have a civilization, but they're more of an energetic being. And I think that they bring us different information. But they're also, I would say, multidimensionals extraterrestrials and also people that have passed over. I think there's a lot of energies from people who have passed over that are out in the field of consciousness that we pick up on also. So all of these bring different levels and forms of information to us if we're willing to receive it and if we're willing to participate.
Right. Are you familiar with Penny Pierce?
No.
She's an author. She wrote The Intuitive Way, Be the Dreamer, Not the Dream.
Oh, I love that.
And she speaks a lot about frequency and the idea that there really is no linear time as we understand it. So I wonder, are these multidimensional beings possibly us from another timeline or future, as it were?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think we don't really know the expanse of, I mean, how long has there been religion on the earth? And religion is to a great extent deals with the whole concept of soul and the concept of spirit. And, how souls are created and what the field of spirit is and how we interact with it. So absolutely. I don't think that we have anything close to answers like that. And I will add to that one of the ways that we get answers to that is that we start to co-create with it. If we're just going to sit here and be jaw-droppingly in awe of it or get a dopamine hit off of it, you're not going to really learn about it. You really have to get in, own it, own that part of yourself.
Yeah.
That feels responsive to it and co-create and, write books with it. And I mean, we've got all kinds of exoconscious entrepreneurs. Mia Ferroletto is doing an exoconscious artist in residence where she's bringing in people that are extraterrestrial experiencers, and we also have entrepreneurs that are bringing in technology. We have a lot of healers that are exoconscious healers. And all of these people we have scientists that are part of our institute. All of these people are working directly with extraterrestrials and multidimensionals, and they're co-creating and they're learning about themselves and they're learning about the ETs. And that's one thing I think that Silicon Valley and engineers can really teach us, because I think they've really dug in and done that. People that sit there and try to figure out new coding or new ways of doing things. It's a really creative process. What we're doing is we're adding another level onto that and saying we're going to bring in information from the field of consciousness, from extraterrestrials and multidimensionals in our creation. They may be better, they may be as good, but that's the dimension that we want to work in. And so the whole institute is, can you imagine if we have people doing this kind of work and there's an institute and a community that supports them and gives them an opportunity to meet each other and hopefully in the future get some kind of funding to support them? It's a win-win for the planet and for its people.
Have you downloaded, I guess, is that the right word? Information about Men in Black or the black-eyed children that come knocking on people's doors. In your exoconsciousness connection, have you learned anything or made to understood what those phenomena are?
It's interesting you brought that up because I was born in Clarksburg, West Virginia. Do you know Gray Barker?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, Gray Barker coined Men in Black in my town.
Did you know that growing up?
I must have, because the funniest thing is the highlight of my life growing up in that little town in West Virginia was going to the library. When my mom let me get on the bus, it's like third or fourth grade, I was young, and gave me the money so I could take the bus to the library. And that became the Gray Barker Archives. I think there has been a lot going on in West Virginia. A lot.
There is something up with it.
Yeah, it's populated by Scotch Irish people.
That's me. Mostly.
Yes, me too. Yeah. So, the Scotch Irish people, and it's isolated, and they're mountain people, and they carry that Tuatha, maybe. I don't know. Do you know Tuatha?
No.
Oh, that's the extraterrestrial beings that came to Ireland. The tribe of Dan, Tuatha.
Okay.
It's very cool.
So that's interesting. So my backstory is, one of my parents was adopted. So I didn't know what my full DNA was until we did some testing. So I had no idea, what I was really until very recently. And so Scots Irish was like a new revelation for me that I was like 70%,
Wow.
Yeah. I had no idea. Like I was a mixed bag of all these different possibilities, and the backstory on the other side of the family was unclear. So, but my whole life I've always been attracted to Celtic music, and Irish lore. There was something about it that drew me in, and maybe it's to do with just exposure to cinema growing up. And
I don't think so. I think it's your DNA.
You think so? That's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's your DNA.
So
I think it's
not because of Darby
and the music. Yeah,
it's not because of Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
Oh yeah, God, I love that.
That's one of my favorites. I love that movie. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I work with this position, and I do a lot of work with DNA. I mean, I've been on a really interesting learning curve about DNA, and I see how trauma really actually influences DNA, and how you can bring people out of trauma and kind of ground them and help move them into healthy lives, and their DNA changes.
Right. Well, but see, now isn't that becoming somewhat mainstream academia discussions now? Because epigenetics is a legitimate field.
I think that most academics would look at changing DNA via CRISPR technology.
Gotcha.
Or via some kind of programmable nanoparticles. So they wouldn't be plugged into the consciousness.
So it's not, because epigenetic is basically an outside interference that can change
environmental interference.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, influence. Yeah,
influence on the way that the DNA, it can awaken programming, as it were. But I guess it's not really changing the DNA.
Oh, I know. It changes your DNA. I mean, it changes aspects of your DNA. Absolutely.
Okay.
I think probably in some areas of psychology, you might see people looking more into that eventually. But as I said, I think consciousness is very new.
Why do these beings want to connect with us? Why share?
Because they're part of us.
They're part of us because we're part of a sentient family? Or, okay.
Yeah, because they're part of us, because we participate in this cosmic mind, this field of consciousness together. And I think, there's increasing evidence that they also participate with us in terms of our DNA and our genetic history and our, alien history here on Earth, our cosmic history. And I think that if you look at our psychic, spiritual history, there's many people in spiritual metaphysical schools that talk about the fact that, we move through different planets spiritually throughout the evolution of our soul. So, I think that's always been ever present in, ancient literature. And so, there's many ways that they connect with us. I think we've only seen probably the tip of the iceberg, quite frankly.
Do you subscribe to astrology?
Yes.
So you think it's a legitimate field?
Absolutely, yeah. Do I think it answers all questions? No, not at all. But I think, you're looking at an ancient form of knowledge that was looking at the cosmos and gathering information from that is, millennial of information and knowledge in almost every civilization, especially the Middle East. So to set that aside as silly, I think would be just giving up, a source of information. Like I said, this is that's a multi-layered endeavor here. Yeah. When you go into exoconsciousness and ufology, and why let go of that? I mean, one of our advisory board members is an excellent astrologer, and he always brings in important information to all of us about the cosmic mind, about the alignment of where the planets are at this time. And I think that field has just, I think it's exploded recently with information, with the computer.
Well, what's happening when people are having physical encounters, when they're abducted? What's going on there? Because if we can have this exoconsciousness and connect with these other beings, why the more intrusiveness?
Do you mean in terms of abduction, intrusive?
Yes.
Oh, I'm going to answer that two ways. I think that when Ray Hernandez probably addressed this to you, but it's pretty blatantly obvious when you look at that free survey and what he uncovered in the free survey. And I wrote about this in my chapter. It becomes extremely obvious that something else was going on, that people who specialize in, quote, abduction, okay, that there was maybe something going in terms of a military program, or were there instances of mind control, people who were mind controlled and implanted with extraterrestrial type of information, the whole Hollywood mind control kind of information that was coming in, or were clients kind of handpicked and given to John Mack and Bud Hopkins? John Mack and Bud Hopkins went to college together, and Bud Hopkins brought John Mack his clients. So, were we seeing, and John Mack worked for one of the primary CIA MK Ultra heads of MK Ultra programs. So were we seeing, a real kind of select picking of experiencers? And that's why we moved so heavily into abduction. Because when you look at what the survey said, I mean, the survey was dramatically different than that. I mean, you were looking at 80% of the people who were saying that they were never tricked or coerced or abducted. Yeah. Not part of any kind of a reproductive program, not part of a breeding program. And yet, that's a huge majority.
That is.
And yet, if you look back on the case studies of abduction theory, it's the opposite. It's 80% were abducted.
Though some percentage change. So some of them started, this was a bad experience, right? A negative experience, and that had evolved into a positive experience.
Which is what the beautiful work that John Mack did, was he took these people that were brought to him by Bud Hopkins, and he turned their life, not all of them were brought by Bud, but he really helped show them this, moving through the trauma, fencing the fear, he called it. It's kind of like what I do. You fence your fear, you move through your trauma, and you have this ontological awakening of who you are as a cosmic being, and that this is part of your spiritual transformation. So yes, absolutely, that is what's happening. So my only question is, why the incongruity between Ray Hernandez and the free group's survey and this, the people that came through these abduction cases? I don't know. I'm just saying, there's probably some reason why there was such a stark difference, because there definitely is an effect of contact. I mean, by far. And it goes way beyond I was abducted. I mean, it goes into redefining yourself as an exoconscious human. It goes into physical transformations. People's DNA is healed. They become healers. Mm-hmm. Your consciousness expands. You develop psychic abilities, for example, telepathy, psychokinesis, all these different types of clairvoyance abilities. Your whole view of religion changes. You move into more of a spirituality, of an individual path of spirituality. So you're looking at, your mind, body, and your spirit and your emotions all changing in this. It's a massively transformative experience.
Right.
It goes way beyond, oh my golly, I was abducted story. I mean, that's like dopamine for the masses.
And that's why you should be teaching a course on ufology, so we can get a bunch of brains together, studying this day in and day out.
Well, I'd love to do it.
All right, Rebecca, thank you so much for coming on tonight.
Thank you, Alan. This is so much fun.
Yeah. Do you have any last minute thoughts or points that we didn't cover that you'd like to comment on?
Oh, I'd just like to invite people, if they want to join the Institute, please invite us. Please know that you're welcome to invite, to be a member of our community. Mm-hmm. You can reach me through exoconsciousness.com. And we're building a website. We're building a new website. So our website currently for the community is exoconsciousness.org. You can email me through my website, and I'll put you on our newsletter list, which will connect you with other exoconscious people that are healers and artists and inventors and educators. So it's a really exciting time.
Can we, since brevity is so popular, can we just call it Exobrains?
Sure.
Is that okay? hashtag Exobrains.
Hashtag Exobrains. Love it.
All right. As Rebecca's website is RebeccaHardcastleWright.com. Join us next week, Tuesdays, 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on KGRAradio.com, your official contact for the best in alternative talk radio. To find out more, go to KGRadio.com/paranormal now, or you can find me on social media, as we were talking about tonight. But let's not plug the other one. We'll plug this one, at paranormal_now on Twitter. Special thanks to our KGRA producers, Race Hobbs and Bill Skywatcher. Until next time, live in the mystery.